What is up? Welcome to episode number 136 of the People We Love podcast. I'm Adam Choit. If you're new here, what I do is interview people from all walks of life, most often comedians and other creative types about their lives and careers. The conversation is casual, but I also ask everyone to highlight the people they love, who they admire, who've influenced them, inspired them, or supported them. For more, check out peoplewelovepodcast.com. It's at People We Love Podcast on Instagram. And if you're watching on YouTube, you are already there. So please be sure to subscribe, like the video, share them, follow the podcast. I appreciate that. And please do the same on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. That is greatly appreciated as well. I'm at Adam Choit on Instagram and Twitter if you want to follow me. I also have another podcast, Tedeschi Trucks podcast, all about the blues, rock, soul, 12-piece powerhouse band, Tedeschi Trucks band. That's been super fun to do that one as well. If you're into that type of music, definitely want to check that out as well. TEDESCHI Trucks podcast. Tedeschi Trucks podcast is that one. And I also have a short film that I wrote and directed that is now available for free on YouTube and on the film's website. It is a dystopian psychological satire. I appreciate the support on that front as well, for sure. Theeditedmovie.com is the official website for that. The film is embedded on the website as well, so it's another place to watch it for free. I hope you guys enjoy that. But for today's episode of this podcast, we have comedian and podcaster Joe Praino. He's the co-host of the Dirty Sports podcast. He has a mustache, and I'm going to pull up his bio here. He's from New York originally, now living in Venice, California. His shoe size is 13. His height is 6'4". He retired from comedy roughly 3 years ago, according to this website of his. His weight is 185. I think that's all the important facts you need to know about him. And I guess he'll fill in the rest for us. So let's just get started. Without further ado, here's Joe Praino. What's up?
How's it going, Adam?
Good. Did I say your last name right? I always forget. I always think
Praino.
maybe it's
Praino,
just like it's written.
Yeah. So many people mess it up.
How?
Somehow the I gets before the A for a lot of people. Priano, which is weird, which I don't understand. Praino is okay. That's actually closer to probably the Italian pronunciation, but somehow the I gets in front of the A. People mess it up all the time. But I like that you went to my website for my bio. Some things have changed. I am still 6'4". I've not shrunk or grown. Probably put on a couple pounds. Probably closer to 200 now.
All muscle.
And I'm not in Venice anymore. But I was there for a long, long time. And I almost still feel like Venice is my California home, even though it's not where I currently reside.
There's so many directions I already want to go in already. But another thing on your bio, it says favorite pro wrestler, none. Has that changed also?
So it's funny. I built this version of my website originally to promote my special, Joe Praino Takes the Stand, which is available on Amazon if anybody wants to watch it. And I had as most people have, you have various forms of your website over the years. And my web designer was like, you got to write up a bio. And I'm like, I'm not doing a bio. I hate bio pages. She's like, you need a bio. And I didn't do it. And then as a holding place, she went through my special, and everything on that page is a reference to something in my special. So in my special, I have a joke about how I hate professional wrestling. And she just put favorite professional wrestler, none. And I like it. So it's still up there.
That's funny because I thought maybe you do like professional wrestling. I thought that was maybe the joke. You like it so much that you can't even decide on one.
I do. I used to watch wrestling as a kid, and my joke. I'll give everybody a little teaser in case they want to go watch the special. But the joke I did in that set is that I used to be real into professional wrestling when I was like a child, and then I have friends who like never grew up out of it, and they're still like crazy WWE fans. And one time my buddy was like, man, what's your problem? We used to watch it all the time when we were kids together. I was like, can you imagine if we did other shit we used to do when we were kids? Like, can you imagine if I invited you out in the woods and I was like, yo, check out this Playboy I buried? It'd be a weird thing to do. So that the joke is that, some of my friends never got out of wrestling.
I got you. Everybody kind of holds on to those childhood things. How you
Yeah.
holding up, by the way, during whatever year this is? I think it's a new one, but who knows for sure.
2023 is off to a decent start. Went to New York pretty much right after the year started. Actually, went to New York via Cincinnati. So I was at that football game where the guy almost died,
Damn.
which was wild. And then on to New York. And then I just got back to LA yesterday. So off to a good start. Got to see my family, did a bunch of shows in New York. And so far, so good on 2023. I'm not hopeful, but so far, so good.
I'm not hopeful. Why?
Yeah.
Why are you not
I don't
hopeful?
know. I'm an eternal pessimist. You know, every
I
year's
see.
worse than the last.
Maybe you're just joking around and calling yourself that, but really, what you have is reasonable expectations or no expectations.
Yeah.
I don't believe you that you're as pessimist as perhaps you might be saying, or your chosen persona might show.
I think you'd be surprised. I mean, I don't know if I'm an eternal pessimist, but it's like I'm not a huge fan of where we're at in the world today, and it just
Not alone in that.
it seems like it's gonna be tough sledding for a while. So I'm not especially hopeful that 2023 is the year we turn it around.
Yeah. Did you get a refund back from that ticket or partial refund from that Cincinnati? What's the Cincinnati Buffalo game?
You know, I don't know what the official stance on that is. We actually got gifted, myself and Andy Ruther, who's the co-host of the Dirty Sports podcast. We got gifted the seats from a company that he works with, doing some promotions for. And so I don't know. I wonder if they got a refund, but I didn't pay anything for it, so I got a full refund.
There you go. Makes sense. So let's get into your background and your childhood and your life and your
Sure.
journey. I usually ask for people's like earliest memories, even like and which segues into like kind of a little bit of your background, family, where you grew up. So I'll kind of give you the floor to tell me even what sights and sounds maybe you remember.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's horrifying things people tell me.
it's funny because my first memories, like they're like truly my first thing. The first things I can see or hear are going all the way back, both like fairly big events at my house. One, I don't know how old I was, maybe 4 or something like that. And my brother and my sister, actually at that point, my sister wouldn't have been around, but my brother and I, my older brother and I have the same birthday range. Like he's June 30th, I'm July 5th. And when my sister came around a few years later, she was June 12th. So that was like, we were all in the same few weeks. So my parents would always have a big, just summer barbecue, every kid birthday party. And the first real memory I have is probably like around my 4th birthday, which is just a big summer barbecue pool party. You know, there's cake, there's gifts. And it's funny because I don't really remember a whole lot between that and then again another big celebration with gifts, but like I think the following Christmas, so it's like 6 months later. I remember I have a vivid memory of my very first Christmas that I recall, which is the year I got the superhero. What was it? The Fortress? That wasn't the Fortress of Solitude, but it was like the Justice League. You remember them? It was like the where they all met or some shit. So my first 2 memories are both getting gifts, basically.
Those are pleasant, good memories, and I think a lot of kids, and
Yeah,
even myself, kind of remembers, like, actually, like, when I got, like, Nintendo for the first time, we're
sure.
roughly the same age. Your age is on your website, although who knows if that's accurate as
Yeah,
well.
that's accurate.
Yeah. Interesting for sure. So it sounds like you were pretty, close with your family. You had brother, sister, and you grew up in New York City, is that correct?
Just outside of New York, in Katona and Westchester. I have 2 brothers and a sister. So yeah, my older brother, he was the one that had a close birthday to mine. Then we had a younger brother. We have a younger brother. He didn't die. We still have a younger brother, and then a baby sister who came around later on. But I always remember even my younger brother, who was born in like October. We just were like, "You're celebrating in July," because we're getting all the birthdays done at one event. So
Oh, there go
that's the
oh,
first memory.
gotcha. You know what? I remember what I wanted to ask or mention is that, like, since your two of your siblings were born in around in the early summer, late June, early July. I was trying to do like the math in my head, like -9 months. Like, what is going
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
9 months before that? And some kind of like blackouts, snowstorm, or I was like doing the math. I was like, what is it like your parents' like anniversary, something romantic, or I think you
Yeah.
get where I'm going with this.
I wonder. I'll have to do the math on it. I wonder if it comes up near their anniversary. I'm not sure about that, but I know, like, it almost seems like it was planned. Like, summer will be, it felt like summer was planned. My younger brother was born 9 months to the day from New Year's, so we always say he was the New Year's drunken accident, and the rest of us are all within like 2 weeks of each other. So those seem very planned, and he seems very much the accident.
Yeah, maybe you were Thanksgiving or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't do the math. Interesting. So you had three, yeah, and you ended up ultimately with three other siblings, if
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
doing the
Four
math
total. Yep.
correct. And you grew up in Westchester. What kind of kid were you like in elementary school? What were you into? Do you
I
remember?
I weirdly was just always into sports. Like, sports nonstop. My dad
Why
not
is that
a
weird?
Yeah. Well,
It's not weird.
it's weird because that wasn't something that was like, like, I'm sure my kid, should I ever have one, will also be into sports because I'm such like a sports nut. But it was weird for my parents because they were like, where did this come from? My dad's not a big sports guy. He's off the boat Italian. Like, the closest he got to being a sports fan would be like rooting for the Italian World Cup team every 4 years. But otherwise, no one in the family, even my older brother, not a sports guy at all, very like tech savvy as a kid. Even he was always into gadgets and shit like that. And just when I started playing sports, I just took to it, and I loved competing. So it was like sports all the time. My parents would like intro me to that way to like friends and family, like, he's a little athlete. Like, we don't know why, but so it was honestly swimming, basketball, baseball, football, whatever season was going on. I was just watching it, playing it, video game, sports, whatever it was. It was always sports.
What came first? Is it the watching or the playing, or do you even not remember?
I think it was the playing. I was pretty good at baseball. Every kid, you just like get signed up for Little League, and when I got signed up for Little League, I was pretty good. Then I went to a baseball game, and immediately, like, baseball was my thing. And then it was like baseball cards. And then baseball cards are like, well, they have other cards. And then, you get into those, and then you start, what do I like? Oh, basketball, football. So I think it was definitely playing first, because I don't really recall watching a ton of sports until I was like, you know, 9 or 10 or something like that. But was definitely playing like t-ball, and was on the swim team when I was like 6 or 7. So it was definitely playing.
Were you into anything else besides sports, arts, or music, or
A
TV shows,
Yeah,
movies, or any of that stuff?
always a big TV guy. Love TV, love movies. Not really super artsy ever. But my video games, as a kid, like you were talking about getting your first Nintendo. Like, me and my brother got our Nintendo when we were kids, and that was like, you'll spend a whole weekend with your friends over eating pizza and playing video games. But a lot of TV and movies. I, as a kid, just remember my parents. I think we got a TV put in our bedroom. My brother and I shared a room. I think we got it put in our bedroom so that we could play Nintendo in there. And then suddenly it was like, oh, we're sitting in there all day watching MTV or whatever. And actually, that's how I ended up getting into comedy when I was, 12, 13. It started to be like staying up a little too late watching David Letterman on late night. And that was just like where my love of comedy came from.
I've had a few conversations with comedians, and even myself is included in some of this, like the kid with the TV in the room, like looking back, thinking about how it can be probably detrimental and not ideal. And kids probably shouldn't have access to TV in their rooms. Um, but then these kids end up, like ourselves, end up working in entertainment in some capacity. So you kind of come full circle, and maybe it makes sense. And in some ways, maybe we would have sought out like the content, even if we didn't have the TV in our rooms. But it just it's interesting
I
to
was just talking
hear those
about it the other
journeys.
day. I think, there's certainly, you need to have a limit. Like a kid shouldn't be that couch potato sitting in his room, video games 20 hours a day or whatever. And I was, like I said, I was always playing sports and running around, and me and my brothers were always riding our bikes and causing trouble and stuff like that. But I did a lot of like come home after school, like doing homework with the TV on in the background in my room and stuff like that. And I feel like it was definitely helpful as far as intelligence went. I feel like I know so many vocabulary words and the context in which to use them because you hear it used on TV. Or like, I can't even think about all the things I learned, like watching Jeopardy every night, or, what the price of shit costs because you like go out there and you watch Price is Right when you're home from school sick or whatever. So I think there's a limit, but I think you can learn a lot digesting that stuff too. I see my nieces and nephews like on their iPads watching TV, and I'm like, they're doing shit like way more advanced than I was doing at that age. And I feel like it can be helpful to a limit, to a
Right.
point.
That makes sense. And that was a great sales pitch for TV and for kids using devices and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
That like there is something to be said for that because like we're like, oh, the old like I talk to parents of young kids, toddlers, even like babies, like want to be on the devices. And it's like we always think how it's like unhealthy. And it probably is like, especially with not having limits. But these kids are all gonna be like coders and content creators and
Yeah.
Instagram influencers. And like I'm gonna be trying to ride the coattails of them sooner than
Yeah.
later. And I can't keep up with them in a lot of ways. So like in some ways they're on the right tracks with that. It's interesting that you said you were listening to or watching David Letterman when you were like 11, 12, 13 years old. Do you remember like understanding the jokes? Because in some ways I feel like Letterman's a little bit more maybe intelligent or, talking about current events and things like that. Like even like compared to like someone like Conan, who's like obviously a smart dude, but is a little on the sillier side. So I could see kids maybe his jokes resonating with kids or young people more. But like Letterman is an interesting one
Yeah.
to
I mean,
watch.
I remember like, getting most of the jokes, but then if there was a topic, if there was a joke about something topical that I didn't understand, like, you have jokes about stuff. I mean, think about the early 90s. You have jokes about like, I don't know, Monica Lewinsky or whatever. Like that's probably a little bit later on, but something that's so popular to the world that everybody knows about, you're like, okay, I get what that monologue joke's about. But then it would be something political or something, but probably above my pay grade. And what was cool is I would like seek out that information the next day or whatever and be like, what was that joke about? And I feel like the not getting the joke led me to like inquire, like, what am I like? I wanted to be smart enough to get all of it.
Do you know the comedian Kyle Anderson by any chance?
I don't.
Anyway, I was talking to him this is a while back, but when he was like younger than what you were describing, he would watch Jay Leno doing Monica Lewinsky jokes,
Yeah.
and then he would repeat them to his like family and their family friends, and they'd be like, "What the fuck?"
Kid
Kids
knows a
are
lot about
really,
blowjobs.
yeah, I guess so. But kids really are sponges. Did you have any favorite athletes, baseball players when you were, 10, 13, 11, 12, started watching the game?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I'm a big Mets fan.
Yeah, we're gonna
We've
get
talked about
into
that.
this.
We've
Yeah.
talked about that a lot. But my first real, like, it was always the Mets, but like right out of the gate, it was Carter and Keith Hernandez. Those were the guys like that I liked on the mid '80s to late '80s teams. Obviously, Strawberry and Gooden were so huge in New York, but there was something about Gary Carter I liked, and then Keith Hernandez just being like the captain. The guy seemed to be like the leader of the team. Liked him. There was Gooden I was a fan of because there was a big a mural of him on the side of a building in New York as you came down the West Side Highway, and I'd always make my dad like make sure we drove by that, and which I thought was really cool. And then in '88, I remember Greg Jeffries was like the big rookie phenom that everybody was expecting to be the next great Met. And I was like obsessed with Greg. Like I wore number 9 because Jeffries wore 9. I bought the glove he bought. I modeled my batting stance around him. And of course, he, like everything with the Mets, whenever you have high hopes, he was kind of a disappointment. We end up trading him. He goes on to have a pretty good career, but his real highlights were elsewhere. And like I put all my chips in on Greg Jeffries, and the next thing I know, he's on the Phillies and he's on the Royals and he's on the Cardinals. It was devastating.
It's funny because I know exactly what you're talking about. I know all this history, but you being like, you're 43 and I'm 40. So
Yeah.
I was at game 7 of the 86 World Series, but I was sleeping and I was 4 years old. And a lot of the memories from 88, 89, early 90s, those are a little bit fuzzy, but I just know all the names and watching replays and just reading all the books about the Mets. But you kind of lived through this era even as a kid. So it's interesting to hear that 86, 87, 88. Those seasons are kind of a little bit more crystallized in your memory.
And the first game I ever went to was in 86. And then the kid, was a friend of my dad's son. Like, he brought me to a game, and then they brought me in the playoffs in 86. And then that was really what jump-started my love in baseball. And so I became, I was like, oh, this is great. So every year your team just wins the championship. And then, of course, as a Mets fan, I've never experienced it since. But in 87 and 88 and 89, and even into the early 90s, it was you're coming off these great teams. And I was just crazy about it, just obsessed. So that's why Jeffrey's coming up in 88, at the end of 88, and then into 89. It's okay, we won the World Series. We had a couple years off. We had a year off where we didn't do well. 88, we get back to the NLCS and lose to the Dodgers, who go on to win it. Here's the phenom. This guy's the future. And then, of course, we're 30 plus years later, and I'm still 35 years later now. I'm still we're going to win the World Series one day, right?
Yeah. Hopefully, but what I remember is maybe not as like Ennis saying, the sharp memories of the team from the mid, even late 80s. But I remember driving with my dad and my grandfather and coming into the Shea Stadium, and it being packed. Every time we would go, it would be filled almost the entire upper deck, or towards the outer edges. And I remember the K signs, because the Mets fans, I think, were actually the fans who invented posting the letter K, symbolizing a strikeout after pitchers. I think it probably was Doc Gooden, but really they started doing it, I think, with the whole staff, once he came up and started striking out everyone, and then it became a team-wide thing. So I remember the Ks, and I remember the cheering, standing up when there's 2 strikes on the batter, anticipating a strikeout, and just the big crowds. But then things changed in the early mid 90s, and obviously that team and the franchise kind of fell apart in a lot of ways, and the stadium was not as full Tuesday night 1992 for a meaningless game against the Expos in late September, early September, something like that. A lot of great memories at Shea Stadium. Why not the Yankees?
First game I got taken to was a Mets game. Mets were good. Mets won the World Series that year. It was totally bandwagon, be on the winners. And then I always, as a really young kid, in the late 80s and the early 90s, I didn't mind the Yankees. They were also on TV all the time, and it was oh, if the Mets game's not on, I'll watch the Yankees. And I remember really enjoying a lot of the guys that were on those Yankees teams. I liked Matt Noakes, who was their catcher. I liked Mattingly. I liked, Hall, Winfield was, and Henderson in and out of the team. I liked a lot of those guys. It was only in the early 90s, toward the mid 90s, when Steinbrenner comes back and they start winning every year, and you're hearing from all these cocky Yankee fans about all their championships. I was now I fucking hate the Yankees. So
yeah, I was not a fan of what happened in 2000, the Yankees beating the Mets in the World Series. I'm hoping for a rematch, a Subway World Series rematch, and the Mets are able to avenge it at some point. And I was hoping maybe for that this year, with both teams being competitive, but that did not happen. What about your sports journey going into middle school, high school? How serious did things get with baseball, other sports?
Super serious with baseball out of the gate. When I was young, super serious baseball, super serious swimmer. Started playing basketball when I was pretty young, but I was always really short. And so I liked playing basketball, but I didn't feel like I had a super future in basketball. And I was always like thinking like, oh, I want to go, I want to be a baseball player. I want to be an Olympic swimmer or something like that. And basketball was just fun to do. And I really enjoyed it. And I became a big Knicks fan, which like upped my love of basketball. But I was always super short. Luckily in high school, I had a huge growth spurt and got way more serious into basketball. Football got way into when I was like probably 11 or 12, started playing tackle football, and was pretty good. Pretty good wide receiver, pretty good hands. But baseball was always the most serious. But besides swimming when I was really young. And then like as I got into high school and I kind of grew, I was a little bit more legit when it came to like being able to compete in football where you're hitting guys, or in basketball where obviously height helps. So baseball was always a constant. But then as I got older, like it was those big three. Like in high school, I was just like baseball, basketball, football, whatever the season was.
I got you. Interesting. What position did you play in baseball?
Mostly middle infield as a kid, middle infield and pitcher, shortstop, second base. And I started playing in middle school on my middle school team. A guy I played with who ended up being a very good baseball player, played a lot of years in the minors. He was the shortstop. So I was like almost, at second base the whole time, unless he was pitching. And then as I grew, I had that growth spurt. It was like a little tall to be a middle infielder. So I was more third base and pitching, a little bit of outfield. So
what about hitting?
Hitting, I always a decent hitter. I actually think in a way, I wish I had stuck with baseball longer, because I was I feel like I had all the natural skills to be a good hitter. I didn't really understand the game. I had a pretty good handle in the game, but I didn't understand it at the level I probably needed to, going into high school, or like at the end of high school and college. Like I was good. I was a good baseball player, no doubt about it. But I think if I had stuck with it a little longer, because I was always like fooled on off-speed pitches, but like never like no one ever blew a fastball by me, So if you're able to keep up with guys who are throwing pretty hard, it's really more of an approach issue than it is a physical issue. So I'd wish I'd stuck with it, but it was. I was as far as growing up and high school baseball, pretty good hitter.
Very cool. What about other stuff in high school that you remember, memories, or what kind of? Obviously, at the sports, it sounds like you were a jock in high school, essentially.
Yeah, essentially. But went to a little prep school just over the border in Connecticut, all boys school. We had a sister school when we got into high school, 9th grade on. We had a sister school, but you know how it is. Like basically, playing sports, half-assing my way through class, chasing girls. Drinking a couple beers or whatever on the weekend, and causing mayhem with your friends, just riding around town doing what high school boys do.
You are an all-American dude.
Yeah.
That's cool. And what about like junior, senior year? Thoughts about plans, ideas, thoughts about your future, college career? Where were you headed?
Yeah. So there was, it truly was like growing up, I didn't really think anything. I didn't have any plans. I was just like, I'll just be, I'll start game 1 of the World Series, the New York Mets, and like I'll be an athlete. And when you get into high school, especially when you start playing varsity level sports, it becomes very clear who the guys who are going to take it to the next level are. And I had that ability, but I didn't think that I had the ability to go beyond that. Like I was like, oh, I could probably play hoops in college if I went to a certain level school, or I could play baseball if I went to a certain level school. But I didn't think, at some point I realized that it wasn't going to be my career. And I literally remember thinking to myself, if I'm not going to be an athlete, what am I going to do? Like, what will be my life? Like, what am I going to be doing when I'm 25 or 30? And that was when I thought, like, well, what other gig would be like fun? And I would stay up every night watching Letterman. And I was like, you know what? that seems like a good gig. You go out, you tell a couple jokes. Some hot actress sits down on the couch. You flirt with her a little bit. You show a clip of her movie. Some band you like comes out and plays. I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. So at the end of my high school career, I remember telling guidance counselors and making college plans based on I want to go to school and do radio and TV and get that. That's just been my career trajectory or at least goal ever since.
When you say you wanted to have attractive women sitting on the couch and interview people and tell people a couple of jokes, do you literally mean in your senior year of high school, you're like, I want to be a late night talk show host?
Absolutely.
Or was it was that specific? It wasn't like, oh, I want to be in comedy or entertainment. You're like, I want to be a talk show host.
I was like, I want to be David Letterman, like straight up. Like and people always ask me how I got into stand-up comedy or like what made me want to be a stand-up comedian. That's a question you hear a lot. And I always say, I never wanted to be a comedian. I don't want to be a comedian. I went to school for radio and TV and started my radio show the first year I was there and did it. And the only reason I ever tried stand-up is I thought it would be, I started thinking about like, oh, if I want to get out of school and that's the path I want, I don't want to end up like, on a production assistant or something like that. If I want people to believe me that I want to be a talk show host, I should probably like do radio, do TV, do a little stand-up. And so I took a stand-up course while I was in college just to like learn to write a monologue joke essentially. And through the years, it ended up being something that I was naturally pretty good at and ended up being able to make some money at and now still like tour and do all that. But people go, what made you want to do stand-up? I don't want to do stand-up. I still don't want to do stand-up.
You're retired.
Give me my talk show. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, to get decent, I suppose, or work towards becoming a talk show host, your strategy of talking was a good one. The radio and the TV and the stand-up, the practicing talking part to other humans. I think that's a good strategy.
And I was not like an outspoken kid. Like I wasn't like everybody says like a class clown or like I wasn't in school plays. I didn't do any of that because all that stuff was like, I mean, I was a funny kid and everybody in my family's funny. And I was a bit of a wise ass like in class, but I wasn't like a performer at all. And I didn't really even think about it as wanting to be a performer. I wasn't like, oh, I want to be an actor or I want to be on the stage. I was just like, I just want to tell a couple monologue jokes, ask a couple questions, like kind of be an MC of a show. And so that was how I ended up doing stand-up at all.
I'm going to ask you a question that's probably better suited to the conversation about 15, 20 minutes from now. But
Sure.
but I am curious if like your past experience, like as playing sports on, competitive sports in front of crowds, even if it's just high school or whatever, like did that prepare you, or can you draw from that in terms of like going to the stage and performing stand-up comedy or performing? Is there any parallels or
I think
life experience that's useful?
I think the only thing that that I took from that, because it's funny, I said I wasn't a performer. Like sometimes when I'd play in like big basketball games and I'd get fouled, I would get nervous at the free throw line because I had a moment to think. And I was like, oh, everybody's watching you. And in the course of the game, I never got nervous. But whenever it all stopped and everybody was like looking at me, it always made me nervous because I was not the kind of guy who like, sought out the spotlight. But I think the one thing that I take away from playing sports and playing sports in front of people is like, if you're playing sports for real, if you're not, just like some little league kid, like if you're playing sports for real, you're going to fail in front of people. You're going to fail bad. You're going to have a game where you can't hit any of your shots. You're going to have a game where you strike out 4 times. You're going to have a game where you are wide open and they throw you the ball and you drop it. Like it just happens when you play enough. And so I think the thing that sports prepared me for was just like failure is a part of life. And you always hear that about baseball. Like, you can fail 70% of the time in baseball and still be in the Hall of Fame. So sports, I think, prepared me for that in terms of like, sometimes you go out there and it's not your day. And in comedy, I think a lot of people play it safe and try to have a career where it's like they kill it every single time. And I think that you just aren't going to find the best version of yourself comedically if you're always playing it safe. So I always think about like, it's never going to be as bad as that one time at homecoming where I was wide open and I dropped the ball and everybody gone, so it's just, I think it helps me with like failure and preparing for failure, which I think you need to do in comedy.
Especially public failures, that's the difference between comedy and a lot of other failures. They're done publicly in real time.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you took, I think, a stand-up or a public speaking course in college. So why don't you tell me about like college and what that was like and the journey?
In college, I started doing radio. I did radio every semester I was in college. I ended up being the program director.
Where'd you go to school?
Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I got really into radio, and I loved it, and I loved putting my own show on. And I would go into the city. I had a girlfriend when I was in school who was at Columbia in New York, and I would go visit her, and she and her friends went to the comic strip on the Upper East Side a lot, Comic Strip Live. And I remember going one time and being like, this is so cool. These guys are so funny, and you see all these, and you go in there, and I didn't really have I knew about stand up from Comedy Central, and I was a big Eddie Murphy fan as a kid, but I wasn't one of those guys who's like a comedy groupie. Like I wasn't super into stand. Like I watched a lot of stand up, but it just kind of happened. I wasn't a person that was like seeking it out. But I guess it was still very early for somebody, like I was going to stand up shows when I was a teenager, early in college. And it just kind of hit me like, oh, I guess that would be something to do. I read a bio of Letterman that he ended up doing stand-up at the Comedy Store. And my girlfriend at the time, super great, super supportive, was just like, got me the class as a birthday gift and was like, thought this would be cool. You could try your hand at it. Worst case scenario, you learn how to write a joke or two. So I took a course at Comic Strip Live on the Upper East Side in New York. DF Sweedler, who still works there and still runs the comedy class. 8 weeks, you go in, you bring a minute, then you bring, a polished version of that after you go over it. Then you bring 2 minutes and you bring a polished version. And at the end of 8 weeks, you have 5 minutes. You invite all your friends and family. You go up and you do like a graduation show. And I just did really well and ended up starting to do like amateur nights. And when I drive in from college and do a show every once in a while. And then when I got out of school, just kept doing open mics and kept doing it just as a side. Just like, oh, I guess I'm pretty good at this. So I guess I should kind of stick with it. And now 20 plus years later, I'm like, I cannot believe I still do this shit.
Is getting a laugh kind of like getting a base hit and killing at a show? Is that like a win or a home run or something like that? Is there something to that? The feelings?
I think absolutely. I think especially in the sports version, the sports like comparison that definitely is the most is basketball. Like when you're killing it on stage, it's like when you're having one of those basketball nights where you can't miss, and just like everything feels good and you're making all the right moves. But yeah, there's really, people always ask like, what's it like? And it's like, there really is no comparison for like when you're on stage and you're in control, but like those moments when you're playing sports and you just know you've got it that day, that's the closest it comes to the feeling of like having the control of the crowd for sure.
And what about after college? Where do we go from there?
After college, moved to New York City, followed the path of television. Actually, a friend of mine who I met at the comic strip, he was a guy who took the comedy class. He took the same class I did, maybe 6 or 8 months after me. And his first ever stand-up show I hosted. It was an amateur show. It was the graduation show for the same class. And he was older. He's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years older than me. So he was already out in the world working and had been working a while. He was working in the syndication department at the CBS Broadcast Center. and he said, "Hey man, I know you want to get into TV. I'm working at CBS now. Would you like me to throw your name in the ring as a CBS page? You could work with the CBS page department." And anybody who's watched 30 Rock now knows what a page is. It was something I didn't know what it was at the time, but it's basically you're a gopher assistant for the entire broadcast center, and they put you in a CBS jacket and they can point you in whatever direction they need you. And I was like, yeah, Letterman's on CBS. This is the job I'm going to take. So I took a CBS page job and worked on a million different shows as a page, and eventually got hired full time on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Wow. And you had good experience with CBS and your time there?
Yeah, it was. I mean, you can't really, you get paid dog shit as a page. I think we were getting $10 an hour at the time, but you really can't put a price on the experience that you get, especially in the page department, working every aspect of a TV job. There was times where I was doing audience support and just showing people the bathroom, and then there's times where I'm doing running tapes for different feeds, and you just learn every aspect of the business. And for somebody who wanted to make TV, it was super helpful in the first couple of years to see what it took, what's going on inside the control room, what's going on inside the producers' offices, what's going inside the writers' offices, camera people, makeup. Like, you learn every aspect of television when you work for a big broadcast network. And that's something that is still valuable to me today. Like, I just did a guest spot on some TV shows last week when I was in New York, and just being able to see the different type of people that were in the control room there and how they were acting, I was like, okay, I can already judge before I even go on air. Like, is this show legit, or are these guys, are these people kind of faking their way through it? So yeah, it was really, you can't put a price on how valuable it was to work at CBS, especially that young and at that time.
What would someone do to indicate to you that they're faking their way through it, or that they're not competent? If you have anything specific, I mean, it can be clear as day, I guess.
Yeah,
Sometimes when people are not confident or competent.
What was always amazing to me when I worked at CBS is you would go into these control rooms, and the directors of the shows, you could tell, and there's I don't even know how many control rooms at the CBS Broadcast Center in New York. There's probably 20, for the different shows and the different studios. And sometimes you would walk into one to deliver a script or pick up a tape or whatever, and you can tell right then, like, is the guy who's the guy in charge? Can I tell right away? Is he standing? Is he controlling the room? It's almost like a captain or a good head coach. Like, if you watch if you get to see a coach's pregame speech, I bet you half the time you can tell how that team's going to do. If the guy's just kind of fumbling his way through it. So a lot of times whenever I'm doing a TV thing, you walk through a control room on your way into the studio, and I'll just be like, is the guy who's supposed to be in charge here in charge? Is everybody like following his lead? Is he running things? And I would say almost 100% of the time, if I feel like that guy knows what he's doing, it ends up being a good show. And if I walk through there and it seems a little dicey, like it seems like no one's really paying attention, or people are talking on their own and no one's like listening to the general, that it ends up being a sloppy show.
Yeah, it can be easy to spot good and or bad leaders, I guess.
Yeah.
You were doing stand-up this entire time while you were a page at CBS, and just continuing with that as well?
Yeah. It was just something I would do maybe once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks, sometimes a little bit more often. But I was doing a lot of bringer shows, and I was doing a lot of open mics, and I would do an open mic here and there, and then I would do these bringer shows, and it was cool because I'm working at CBS, and everybody the page department's huge, and everybody had a thing that they were trying to do with their life. No one's goal was to be a page forever. Some of them wanted to be newscasters, and some of them wanted to be directors, and some of them wanted to be camera people or whatever. And you get to talk, and you'd be like, yeah, I do stand up at night. I'm doing the show. And so many people that I worked with would come out and support. And that was really cool because it gave me the opportunity to do bigger and bigger shows, because even to this day, I'm sure if you can bring people, you can get on some good shows. And so I always had people that were willing to come out and support. And that was really cool because it got me some stage time. And I even tell young comics now, when people ask me like, should I do bringers? And I'm like, it's all bringers, man. I got to go to Dead Crow Comedy Club in Wilmington, North Carolina in a couple weeks and headline. I'm doing a bringer. You know what I mean? It's my job to get all the people there. So in essence, like, it's kind of the whole name of the game. Like, if you're in a band, you got to get 10 people out to the bar to watch you just to get on. When you're the Rolling Stones, you're doing 100,000 person bringer show is basically what it is.
That's a good point. And there's a lot of, I guess, negativity or criticisms, or like comedians seem to often look back at their bringer show days and think of it as something that they should not have done or avoided. And I feel like you're one of the rare people that I've spoke to that are like, yeah, it's worth it. And obviously you had some of that support through your
I think there's a couple of things to add to that, which is one, you definitely you're trying to get to a point in the middle. The first step is to get past doing them, where you just get invited to do comedy clubs and they, you get invited to do the Improv or the Comedy Cellar or whatever, and they take care of the people there. But, again, like when you make the next level and people are like, all right, sell some tickets, you're kind of just doing bringer shows again. And the other thing that people look back on negatively, and I think this is the most important thing, is, I was always good at sniffing out people that were putting on a good show and people that were trying to take advantage of comics, taking advantage of people bringing their friends out. You find so quickly those bringer show producers that are just conning people into bringing their friends so that they can do their own time, or so that they can sell drinks, just so they can make money on tickets. And I think I was good at avoiding those people. And then I was also good at finding the people who ran good, supportive bringer shows. I don't know if do you know Jessica Curson?
I guess not off the top of my head.
She is a killer comedian. And if anybody is watching this, doesn't know her, check it out. But she's, she did Bill Burr's last Netflix thing, and she's a world famous touring comic, and she just destroys. But she used to run a bringer show at Gotham Comedy Club 20 years ago that I would do all the time. And Amy Schumer would do all the time. And Colin Kane would do all the time. And it was a good, supportive show. It wasn't about Jessica getting up and doing her time. She put on a great show, and it jump-started a lot of people's careers.
Good stuff. Where do we go from there? I'm guessing you're in your 20s. You may or may not be a page now, and you're doing comedy, maybe getting deeper into it more, I'm guessing.
Yep. Got deeper into comedy. And at some point, I got offers to do some college touring. I was a young comic. I was putting together some time, and I knew I had a lot of support from the people I worked with at CBS, and my boss, the executive producer, was like, he tried to get me a gig at the Daily Show. He's like, I think he had come and seen me do comedy. He's like, I think comedy's for sure the path for you. He tried to get me a gig at the Daily Show. It didn't work out, but he saw how talented I was at that. And I remember at one point saying, hey, I think I'm gonna quit and try to do this comedy thing, go on tour for a little bit, tour some colleges. I was like, I don't know how long that'll last or whatever. And he was really great to me. He said, listen, you're a smart kid. You're really good at this. You should do it now. And if it doesn't work out, you can always come back here. And I did. And it worked out for a minute. And then the next thing I know, 6 months later, I'm employed and unemployed, and I'm bouncing around, shitty production jobs for a bit. But I quit working at CBS just to kind of pursue stand-up comedy a little bit more. And for the next, I would say 10 years or so, maybe not quite, maybe 8 years, the next 8 years, it was some combination of part-time jobs, part-time production gigs, restaurant work, whatever, and chasing stand-up comedy. And it was just, I did my own show in Brooklyn for a while. I did my own variety show. I was shooting short films and making sketches, and just head first into like the comedy creation world. And career wise was kind of put on the back burner. It was just do whatever you can to pay the bills while you do comedy stuff.
Gotcha. Sounds like a fun but also challenging time period as well. I'm guessing, and maybe stressful at times, but also creatively rewarding at times. A lot happening.
Super stressful, super poor, true starving artist. Like, and I look at the time, it was so stressful. It was like, how do I make ends meet? How do I pay my bills at the end of the month? How do I, feed my dog? I was never like, I'd have a girlfriend, and it wouldn't be like, there's no taking her on vacation. There's no like, you're just struggling to get by. And I remember being so stressed at the time, but also so much creation. And I look back now, and I talk to some of my friends who are in that world with me now. It's like easily the best time of our lives. Like, I mean, those being in my 20s in New York and just like bouncing around the comedy world and making fun sketches and putting on fun shows and having fun parties. And it's by far the best time of my life. And when you're in it, you're like, man, this is so stressful. I'm so poor. I just want to be able to eat a steak.
How do we get to LA? From New York?
So one of the gigs that I got as a part-time help me pay the bills is I started coaching baseball. And I coached baseball at a high school on the Upper West Side called Collegiate. And I also coached at a baseball camp in the Hamptons. I would go out to the Hamptons every summer, live in my buddies' like share house while they were at it. They would go out there for the weekends. I would go out there during the week and kind of be in their house alone. And I would coach at this baseball camp. And the guy who ran the baseball camp was super awesome, and the camp just killed it. And I essentially ran the camp for him. And he was like, man, you can't be a baseball camp counselor your whole life. But you could, find a place to do your own version of this. And so I needed to find some place else that I could kind of start a similar business model. And I knew I didn't want to give up on comedy. So I just was like, hey, I'll go to LA. I'll start a baseball camp with this guy's business model, and I'll still keep pursuing comedy. I came out here. It's exactly what I tried to do. And I'm not cut out to run a small business, but it was fun for a while, and it did really well. But comedy just did better. And soon I was just, able to get by doing, just comedy work. And I coached high school baseball out here for a while, and I coached at these camps. But essentially that was what brought me out here. Is I thought it would be a place to like coach some baseball in the same, steal sort of his business model and do it in a different place. But all it ended up being was a change of scenery for my comedy career, and kind of jump started it. And I met a lot of great people in comedy, and, that's it. Just eventually that was the thing. I don't know if it was being a little older or being a little bit more, a better comic, or being a little bit more business savvy, but getting out here is where it really took off and started to become a career.
You said that you moved to LA, obviously, to because you thought it'd be a good place to set up the baseball camp and all that, the school. But you came out here also to continue comedy as well, from what I understood.
Yeah.
If I understood, yeah.
Yeah.
What was the name of that school in the baseball camp in the Hamptons called?
Hamptons Baseball Camp.
Who do you know who ran it? Because I guess I don't recognize the name.
Yeah, Eddie McCarthy, who was a very good at college baseball. I think he might have been collegiate player of the year or national player of the year or something like that. And just a really good. He was just like a really good coach. It was for kids. It was ages 5 to 12, so it was like young kids. And he was just like a really good teacher of young kids. And he had a very crazy and strange and sort of almost progressive style. And then he just kind of like, he handed it over, and I was able to sort of take over and be the head coach. And it was just a really cool, fun thing to do. is be involved in baseball again after all those years of playing. It kind of came full circle to like, oh, I was involved in the baseball world again. But to me, it was like, okay, wherever I go, because I was thinking, oh, maybe I take this model to Hawaii, or maybe I take it to wherever. And I wanted to go someplace where I'd like enjoy the atmosphere, but I didn't want to give up on comedy. And everything seemed like a step back besides LA. You know, you're coming from New York, starting stand up in New York. Where do you go from there? You know, you can't just move to Chicago. You can't move to San Diego. So I was like, I guess I'm going to LA. And it just all worked out.
Very, very cool. Why are you not cut out to be a small business person?
Just paperwork and LLC payments and insurance. And it's like all the things I don't ever want to be doing. In a way, what I realized when I started that business was I was great at being the head coach of this guy's baseball school that he did all that shit for. I'm not, you know, I don't want to deal with, you know, some kid getting hurt and does our insurance cover it, or does the kid's parents? And like, I just wanted to coach kids and just really be around baseball. And so that actually shifted. Like after I kind of gave up on running that school, I worked in baseball for a little bit. I did some baseball sales for a company for a while. Then I started coaching high school baseball out here for a long time. And it was just always something that was kind of, my baseball life was always something that kind of helped me just keep my head above water while I figured out what was going on in comedy. And I remember very clearly, I think it's about 5 seasons ago now, it'll be 5 years ago this spring was the first spring that came around. And I was like, I don't have time to coach high school baseball this year. Like, I'm just on the road too much. I'm doing too much in comedy. I'm doing too many auditions. I'm pitching too many shows. I just don't have the time for it. And it was sad that I couldn't do it anymore, but it was also meant that I was doing well enough in the other stuff where I didn't have time for it.
That's a great sign and a great feeling, I'm sure. And in some ways, like you were describing baseball, like your baseball history and knowledge, experience, ability to coach and all of that, like it benefited your comedy career directly because you're able to sustain your life, I guess, financially over the years because of baseball. That's cool. A credit to baseball. Why don't you tell me some more of, I guess, your LA highlights or you know, things that jump out at you from your LA comedy life over the past few years?
You know, I think the LA highlights for me, I don't know if it's being, you know, younger in New York and kind of being around a lot of people that I grew up with there, and started either in comedy with or whatever, but I didn't feel like I had much of a community in stand-up comedy in New York. And in LA, I think the best part about my LA comedy life is that I made like friends with really, really great comics. And a lot of them helped me get to where I am today. Like I became friends with Lachlan Patterson pretty quickly on moving out here. We started a podcast together. We surfed together. I went on the road and opened for him. I went on the road when he was doing Last Comic Standing. You know, he was the runner up for Last Comic Standing. So just to see somebody go from kind of nobody to like super somebody overnight with all the TV exposure. I became really good friends with Eddie Ift, who I have opened for years and has helped me become a headliner, you know, just in being able to go places and do clubs. Like, you know, like I mentioned before, I'll be at Dead Crow Comedy Club in North Carolina in a few weeks. And that's just from going there with Eddie, opening for him, doing well, and then being like, come back. So I think what, you know, my real highlights for LA comedy are the people that have helped me kind of like, I wouldn't have been able to actually make a career doing comedy without some of the people that I've met in comedy here. And in New York, I felt like nobody in comedy really, like, you know, I didn't really have that kind of community. So yeah, I mean, my LA comedy highlights, meeting those people, getting to do some great touring, getting to the point where I can headline myself. You know, I did Just for Laughs in Montreal. I did New Faces. That was summer of 2019. That's probably my stand-up highlight since I moved to LA. And then just, now actually to the point where I'm passed at all the clubs and I'm headlining on the road. And it's like, for so long, people go, "Oh, what do you do?" And you say you're a stand-up comedian, but really you're coaching a baseball camp in the Hamptons, or you're working in a fucking kitchen or whatever. And it's finally the point where it's like, I don't know, the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, where you're like, I'm a comedian. It's like, I am a comedian. You know what I mean? That's comedy and comedy adjacent things like my podcast. They pay the bills.
That's great. That's awesome. Very, very cool stuff. I'm curious, like, why do you think in New York you never were able to form or find, or that community was never able to become a thing? Does it partially, you think, because maybe your skill level was not at what it is now, and once you started to move to LA and just grow as a comedian, why not have that community
I
in
think
New York
I
too?
think there's a couple things. I think one, the the comedy scene in New York, it's so competitive, and people go to New York to be a stand-up comic. I feel like some people come to LA to be a stand-up comic, but I feel like a lot of people in LA, want to be an actor, or want to be a talk show host, or want to be a reality show host, or whatever. And in New York, it's so competitive in just stand-up comedy that I feel like everybody is, you're kind of all jockeying for spots, and you're all jockeying for position. And I actually got into it really young, in New York, and I got in, and I was pretty good out of the gate. And I actually think, not to sound like, egotistical, because I know, I know how good I am at comedy right now. But I think maybe I was too good for how young I was, and maybe it rubbed people the wrong way, that like I thought I deserved more than I was getting. Some 20 or 22-year-old kid walks into the club and he's pretty good, and maybe I just had a bad attitude. But I also think, like I said before, I was from New York, and all my high school friends moved to New York after school, and it's just like I had my own community of people. I didn't need to make friends in comedy. And in LA, I came out here, I didn't know anybody, and so obviously you make a lot of friends doing whatever you're doing. I made a lot of friends in comedy. I made a lot of friends, in the baseball world. And I think in New York, it was more about me just like not being open to it, maybe being a little too competitive, maybe having a little bit of a attitude, and also just like not needing friends.
Yeah, I follow that, and that makes sense. Maybe especially as a young guy, you're gonna have more of that attitude that you describe. But even if you don't like, I feel like even if you don't outwardly express that type of like attitude, even with your words, people can kind of like tell just like your overall how you carry yourself if you kind of have that like sort of attitude. I guess even if you didn't explicitly say anything bad
Yeah,
to anyone, but
yeah,
like
yeah.
I could see like getting a sense of like where you're coming from. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just a few more. Do you have any like other Mets highlights over the years? Not necessarily from the team's success or failures, but like haven't you like been on the field or had
I
personal
have,
interactions
yeah.
with Mets over the years and like those types of things?
Yeah, I
Tell
mean, I
me
think
some tell me some personal Mets stuff.
the two big moments that stand out for me, in 2015, in the 2015 season, that they ended up going on to play in the World Series, and I threw a first pitch out at a Mets
Very
game.
cool.
I had my podcast Dirty Sports, and I remember just watching. It was like the first or the second game of the year, and I watched Edie Falco from The Sopranos throw out a first pitch and just like bounce it. And then I watched 50 Cent with his famous thing. And I think I mentioned on the show, man, like I hope I get big enough one day where I can go out there and throw my fastball. And it just became an internet thing. Like our fans started tweeting at the Mets, and eventually the Mets were like, come out and do it. So June of that year, Mets were in second place. I threw a pitch, and they go on to win the division. They go on to play in the World Series. That's definitely my personal Mets highlight. That, and just this past year, I guess it would have been late in the 2021 season. The Mets, through a connection of mine, I went and performed stand-up comedy for Mets executives and Mets employees on a day where they were out of town, on a day they were out on the road. So we did some Mets stuff, and now I'm just kind of like in with the Mets over there. Like I've got a contact at the Mets. I get tickets when I go to town, and I've been in the locker room, and I've been in the thing. So it's like it's kind of cool just being in sports media now, with my podcast, and then being a comedian. I will plan road trips. Like I'll plan road work, stand-up work around where the Mets are going to be. Like I'll hit up clubs, and I do this for the Giants too, for the football team. Like I hit up the club in Texas when the Giants were there for Thanksgiving, booked a headlining weekend, and I went to the Thanksgiving Giants Cowboys game. But at this point with the Mets, it's like I've booked enough road work where I go see them, and I book gigs around going to see them in New York, and I'm constantly talking about them on Instagram or on my podcast or whatever.
I see.
Yeah, where it's like people, like, I don't want to say I'm a celebrity Mets fan, but I'm like I'm a C-list celebrity Mets fan, and I feel like the team knows me, and people know me as like a Mets. I'm like a semi-famous Mets fan, and it's cool. It's like
you are.
It's nice to be appreciated by the team, and it's nice to be always having people offering me the opportunity. Anything that's Mets, people like tell me about it more than I find out about it myself, and it's great. And I'm excited for what's going to happen. I'm excited that I'm sort of blossoming in my career at the same time as the Mets are kind of turning around the organization. So maybe
we hope.
Yeah,
it seems like with the new ownership and all that, and I am happy for you and living vicariously through you. I'm to some degree as well, and jealous, and I mean that in a cool way. Of course, that's awesome. You said you did stand up for like the executives for did you do for Steve Cohen, the owner as well?
No, Steve Cohen wasn't there, but it was like they were trying to do some Facebook content or whatever. They were trying to like just have some non-baseball stuff that they put on their social media. So they got a bunch of I think it was the PR people and the social media people and the marketing folks, and we were just on one of the decks that overlooked the field. And I did a couple of minutes of Mets fan material and what it was like, growing up as a Mets fan and stuff like that. And then just did some regular old stand-up jokes for them. And I think their hope was cutting it and putting it on some of their social media platforms. I think it made it out there at some point, but it was just cool, like to the backdrop to be Citi Field, like have the field behind you while you're doing stand-up comedy and being like, man, my goal was always to be on there with a glove on or a bat in my hand. But, as far as second options go, this isn't too bad.
It just seems like that. I don't know, with people that I talk to that work hard and pursue their passions, like life has many twists and turns and journeys, but it does seem like a lot of the time, like these different like worlds that they were once part of or used to be part of or still part of in a small capacity, they sort of interweave and find their way. Like your baseball knowledge coincides with your stand-up act. You're kind of combining those. Obviously you did some Met stuff like you were saying, and then like baseball literally helping pay the bills as you improve as a comedian. Just interesting to hear how people's like skills and different parts of their lives pop back up or continue to like benefit them in some way. It's like nothing is a waste. And even just like you saying, like not learning to like, or not realizing you're not cut out for running a business, like that's I don't want to say a talent, but it's a positive trait. It's it is certainly that you were able to quickly pivot and realize that, hey, it's a sign that you know yourself and you're self-aware, and that's cool too. Random question that I try to remember to ask people because it always tends to yield interesting answers. Ghosts, aliens, UFOs, do we believe in those? Have we had any personal experience? How do we feel about
I don't believe in ghosts, and the reason I don't believe in ghosts is I've been a 1,000 places now that people tell me are haunted, whether it be like there's a hotel in Alaska for the one of the comedy clubs there. They put you up in a haunted hotel, and there's a guest book where people write all the haunted sightings that they've had there. I was just in a town up in Nevada where we were on a haunted ghost tour where they saw this apparition move through the thing. The house that I used to stay at in the Hamptons, Everybody swears that house is haunted. I've never had any experience at all. I've been so many places that they claim are haunted, and I've never had one inkling of feeling like there's a ghost. I've been alone in all these places, and I'm like, no, nothing. Now maybe ghosts hate mustaches or something. I don't know, but the amount of places I've been that people swear are like aggressively haunted, and I have no experience. I'm like, man, I'm going to all the places that you tell me I'm supposed to go if I want to see a ghost, and I got nothing. Aliens, it just seems so insane to think that the universe is as big as it is, and we're the only people, the only living human. Like, just like, to me, mathematically and scientifically, the odds of that being possible are insane. Like, there has to be life on other planets. There has to be life that's like evolved ahead of us. There has to be life that's evolving behind us. There has to be aliens out there.
Have they been here?
I don't know. I mean, you see those videos that have come out in the last couple of years, the Navy showing these like things like,
the UFOs, the lights and stuff.
Yeah.
The shit, the spaceships, whatever. They disappear.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yeah, but I don't know. But I definitely think there are there are aliens, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. You're unhauntable.
Yeah, exactly.
You're unhauntable. Why don't you tell me about your podcast or any other things you're working on these days? I'll give you the floor to tell me about those and plug stuff and let you get out of here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Dirty Sports Podcast is twice a week. We usually go live on Mondays and Thursdays on our YouTube channel, and then it's always up soon after on all the places that podcasts are available. I do that with another comedian, Andy Ruther. We talk all sports, but mostly pro sports: baseball, basketball, football. Like I played, were my big three. So we talk about those a lot. And then, just touring. A lot of work in the near future. I'll be in Vegas at the Comedy Cellar all next week, the 16th to the 22nd of January. I'll be at Dead Crow Comedy Club in Wilmington, North Carolina. After that, I'm doing Sketch Fest in San Francisco in early February. And on and on and on into the spring. I'll just be doing stand-up comedy until early April, when the Mets, have opening day again. And then you can probably find me on whatever comedy club is in whatever town the Mets are on the road at. But if you want to follow me along, or if you want to try to see a stand-up show, I'm on all social media at Joe Praino, except Twitter, where I'm at Fix Your Life. So give me a follow on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and you can see some stand-up, and hopefully you can come out and see a show.
Oh, very cool. I appreciate the time, the stories, all the information, the Met stuff. You are like the perfect person for me to be following on social media. You cover a lot of my personal interests, and they're a good cross section for everything from the comedy to the Met stuff, and just being a good dude. And I appreciate you, and I'll let you get on with the rest of your evening.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on your stand-up show that you produce.
Oh, I would love to get you back on at some point for sure this year.
Yeah, man. I've always appreciated that you've always been really cool reaching out and being a supporter, and that, like I said, it's something that I didn't really have for a really long time. It's like, LA's got that's one thing about LA. People have that vibe. They they reach out to people that they like or they're interested in. And I appreciate you doing that for me, getting to know you, doing your show and not doing your podcast. So thank you for the time too.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And let's talk soon.
Absolutely, brother.
Oh, you got it. Later.
Peace.
So there you go. Episode 136 with Joe Praino. That was super fun. I am jealous of him and all his Mets exploits, so to speak, and getting to perform for Mets brass and going to throw out the first pitch. I would be very nervous that I would throw it like 50 Cent did, nearly into the first or second row. But that aside, for everything about this show, please head to peoplewelovepodcast.com, at peoplewelovepodcast on Instagram. I'm at Adam Choid on Instagram and Twitter if you want to follow me. My other podcast is Tedeschi Trucks Podcast, all about the blues, soul, rock powerhouse band, Tedeschi Trucks Band. That's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast, TEDESCHI Trucks Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to that. theeditedmovie.com for my short film that I wrote and directed. That's over there. But I think that's about all I got for today. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you as always. And let's talk soon. Peace.